All right. Coronavirus. Highlighting past failures and leading to social service cuts soon. So I did a video earlier today, and I meant to talk about some of the past failures that coronavirus is highlighting. I think I kind of got off track because I have a lot to say, and I never got back to my original point. But it happens. Yeah. But anyway, I was featured in an article yesterday on March 11th, 2020, that had to do with how coronavirus affects or could affect the homeless community here in Washington, D.C. And as I talked about a number of different things, like the fact that shelter beds are 2.5, 3 feet apart, and that the homeless travel from shelters to soup kitchens to day programs, and one person could very easily infect 100 people, who in turn infect 100 unduplicated people each. So that gets us over 10,000. I meant to also mention how that had the city adequately decreased homelessness years ago, when they said they were setting out to do that, then we might not have as many large communal shelters as we now have. Now, I might have actually said it. I mean, but I think I may have forgotten. In any instance, if I did say it then, I've said it again now, that had we fixed the homeless problem years ago, then we might not have so many large communal shelters. And we actually have about as many homeless people now as we had when I started advocating around homelessness in 2006. So right around 7,000. We count them every January as per HUD rules. And we counted, it was give or take right around 6,000. I think it was like 6,200 and something in 2006, and went down to, or actually, I take that back. It was 6157 in 2006. It went down to 5757 in 2007. It went up to 6,044 in 2008. And then there were modest increases to 6,200 and something, and then 6,500 and something. But that said, it has bounced right around the 6,000, 6,500 mark. So in 2019, we counted 6,500 and something homeless people. I think 65, 61, something like that. And we counted them this past January. The numbers come out in May. City officials are expecting an increase, so we may be talking 67, 6,800 homeless people. So it's a glitch pattern by all means, but the city did come up with a 10-year plan in 2004 for ending homelessness. They didn't end it by the end of 2014. Muriel Bowser became mayor in 2015. Her administration devised a 5-year plan, which took effect on October 1st, 2015. So we're nearing the end of that 5-year plan period, and we're really not doing a whole lot better than when she took office. Let me see. We had like 7,204. Let me see. Oh man, let me see. So we gained. It was 8,350 and 7,298. So it was 7,298 in 2015. So, no, that's all I got. But so we may be right up around 6,800 again, which is still less than we had when she took office. But that brings me back to my point, though. We could be entering a coronavirus-induced recession. The federal government and Wall Street aren't calling it that just yet, But I will say this, that the Dow reached its highest level ever 1 month ago. It was 29,551.42. And as of today, it is 21,200.62. So it lost more than 8,000 points. And that's more than a quarter of its volume in the last month. 2 more months like this, and we're in some big trouble. 3 more months like this, we won't have a stock market. So how does that affect the homeless? Well, let's go back 12 years. I began advocating in June 2006, so during the economic downturn of 2008, I was pretty deep into my advocacy. But I remember the fall of 2008. It had to have been October 2008. I was in the library, I looked at an email, and I saw a crisis email saying that there were going to be major cuts to social services, and we had to act immediately. That was on a weekend, and that following week, there were dozens and dozens of homeless advocates, nonprofit personnel, and what have you, down at City Hall begging city officials not to cut the budget for social services. Then Councilman Tommy Wells explained things rather well, because October is the beginning of the fiscal year, October 1st. And he explained rather briefly that if we wait to do the cuts, then we're going to have to do double cuts. Now, I understood his point because I'm mathematically inclined, but let me explain it to you for those of you who don't understand it. Let's suppose that your homeless services budget is $100, keeping the number simple. Your fiscal year starts on October 1st. Now, you're expected to use about $8.33 out of that every month. So in April 1st, you should have $50 left. Now, if it's determined that because of the economy, we have to cut $10 from your budget, if we cut $10 at the very beginning of the fiscal year, around October 1st, then we have to cut 10% of the services in accordance with the 10% budget cut. If we wait until April, which is halfway through the fiscal year, and we cut the same $10, in April you only have $50 left, so the $10 represents 20% of your budget as opposed to 10%. So then we have to cut 20% of the services instead of just cutting 10% of the services. That's what he meant when he said we have to do double cuts if we wait till April. So there you have it. But as the economy tanks because of the coronavirus, then you're going to see different governments doing budget cuts, and it may be another month before they declare a financial crisis, and it's March already. So in April, if they declare a budget crisis, then they begin to do budget cuts, and we're going to have to cut twice as many services as we would have cut if we had done the cuts this past October. Of course, coronavirus wasn't out then, so I can't hold that against them. But even so, we're going to have some very deep cuts to various services that people need. And earlier, I was wondering about what would make people rise up and force change, because We've been in the fight to create affordable housing for many years, and we're losing that fight. We've been in the fight to get DC government to focus on getting homeless people connected to living wage jobs and affordable housing, and they've not done that. Okay, they've not made any robust effort. Sure, they can mention some token efforts, but they haven't made any robust, notable effort. But we've been fighting for a number of different things, and I personally have not fought for handouts. I fought for living wage jobs and affordable housing that formerly homeless people, once they become formerly homeless, would end up paying for, in part, if not in full. But that said, now these years and years of failed effort are coming back to bite us. I've talked in other videos about how in January 2013, I began to bring forth the issue of the future of the CCNV shelter. And long story short, we had a 9-month task force from October of 2013 to July of 2014. We talked about the future of the shelter and its people. In 2014, they began a major construction project across the road from the shelter. It's a 2.2 million square foot, $1.3 billion construction project, and I'm pretty sure they're not going to want the shelter to remain once that is completed. And being a realist, I've said, I'm not fighting the closure. What I'm saying is help people get living wage jobs and affordable housing before the closure. I wanted the current mayor to use as many as 5 of the remaining years to get homeless people connected to living wage jobs and affordable housing. The construction project was slated to be finished in 2025. Now it could be done in 2021. I spoke to the developer back in December 2014, and he told me that they were aiming for a 2023 finish. Well, they've evidently done better than they expected, because they're going to be done in 2021. The 30-year covenant between the federal government and DC government that has that building as a shelter expires in 2021 as well. That building used to be a federal building. Actually, it still is for another year. But after the 30-year covenant expires, DC government will own the building outright, and they can do what they want with it. They can change the purpose. And so now we have the construction finishing in 2021. We have the covenant ending in 2021. The DC government gets the right to change the purpose of the building or to knock it down. And I can pretty much assure you that, because it's an 80-year-old building and it's got its flaws, it's going to be knocked down and replaced. Besides that, it's only 4 floors, a basement, 1, 2, and 3. Other buildings in the area are 10 stories high. And so that building's going to be history. But we've been fighting for a number of things for a number of years. The current mayor was on the council when the task force completed its work. The council actually passed legislation as a result of the 9-month task force, which was led by Councilman Jim Graham, who has since died. And so the mayor was a signatory on the legislation that was passed as a result of the task force, and she knew that this conversation about the future of the shelter was taking place. And the city also has what's called the comprehensive plan, which has to do with planning out dozens and dozens of construction projects across the city. In addition to the construction project to the north of the shelter, the Capitol Crossing construction project, there is discussion within that plan of knocking down or renovating the U.S. Department of Labor building to the south of the shelter. And so with all this development around the shelter, it's pretty much a done deal that it's going to be history very soon. And my gripe is not that the shelter would be closed, but that the mayor has wasted all this time and not put any meaningful services in there to make sure that people have a way out of homelessness before it's closed. That is my gripe. But That said, there's going to be this massive confluence, this perfect storm of different circumstances coming together, all these different systemic failures, the failure to address the future of the shelter, the failure to substantially decrease the number of homeless people in D.C., and the coronavirus is now going around, and it hasn't gotten into the shelter as far as I know, any of the D.C. shelters, but if it does get into the homeless community, it's going to spread like wildfire because of the communal settings that the homeless people go from the shelter to the soup kitchen to the day programs and what have you. And so, that said, we're going to have this perfect storm of different systemic failures all coming together all of a sudden. And I should also say before I sign off, that the failures of our electoral system, including the fact that 63 million people did not vote in 2016, and the Electoral College, and the fact that 7 million people voted third party, all those things came together to now give us Donald Trump, and then there are all of his failures just because of how he thinks, for lack of a better term. And there's the failure of the Senate to remove him. And so all these different failures are all coming together, and I see God in all of this. I see God saying, look at how fragile your system is, your political system, your system of governance, and so forth and so on. People don't want to really think about and talk about what God wants. They don't want to apply biblical scriptures in all that they say and do, and now it's coming back to bite them in the ass, and that's a good place to stop. Signing off.